the triangular landmass there. And the object really was to sort of survey the country in general for the Exploration Society, and in particular to look at mining in the area and that sort of thing. It was a turquoise mining area particularly, and copper mining was done there. So he was going to survey the country. So he took a team of chaps out there in 1904, and he decided that while he was there, one of the things that they would do is to follow the directions in the Bible, in the book of Exodus, and to actually explore the mountain of Moses while he was there. So he got the directions, and the first thing that he discovered was that the mountain that the Bible led the team to, was not the mountain that is actually today called Mount Sinai, which sits at the bottom of the peninsula. That particular mountain got its name in the 4th century from a group of Greek Christian monks who decided it was a jolly good place to set up a monastery.
Uh-huh.
But anyway,
so they set the monastery up and then claimed the provenance.
That's right, yeah.
Mountain,
yeah. I mean, it's a lovely little monastery. It's got a lovely art collection there. It's really quite nice, but it's in the wrong place. The actual mountain is much further north in the country. And if you think about it, if they were traveling across Sinai from Egypt to get to the land of Canaan, Palestine, they would never have had to go way down to the bottom of Sinai to do that. So they would have traveled much more across country to do that. So anyway, he found the mountain, Mount Horeb, as it's called in the Bible. In fact, it doesn't get called Mount Sinai for a while. It's called Mount Horeb.
Yes.
Effectively in the Bible. And he got there and he found the mountain, and he thought, well, this is a very exciting discovery, actually. I think this is the place.
And this word, Horeb, or Horeb, is a very important word. Do you want to discuss it just parenthetically now, or will we get back?
Well, yes, actually. I might as well, because not that I think he probably knew it at the time, but the original word Horeb was spelt with a C. It was C-H-O-R-E-B, and the C was silent. So in English translation, it became H-O-R-E-B, but it was pronounced Horeb, spelt Choreb. And in actual fact, in the more Greco-Roman spelling of the word, it was not Choreb, but Cherub, as in angel cherub, which came from the Semitic word kerub, beginning with a Q or a K, and the word meant flight, which is interesting. So it was the mountain of flight, in real terms.
Flight. Well, that is going to definitely tie into what we're going to be discussing. Don't think for a minute this is an ordinary discussion about the past. This is a discussion about the past by a man who knows a lot of secrets. So, back to the Mount. Sir Flinders Petrie stands on the mountain of flight without knowing quite what it is, and what happens next?
Okay, well, he decided, as all good explorers must, that having got there, it would be jolly nice to climb to the top. And in fact, since they were surveying the country, and it was a pretty high mountain, it rose to about, little over 2,500 feet above sea level. So he took the team up to the top. And what they discovered when they got very, very close to the top was that it flattened out before the sort of pointy bit, and there's this wonderful great plateau. And it was covered in rubble, but out of the rubble he could see various standing stones and pillars and various things protruding. So they then spent weeks and weeks up this place, got the local Bedouins to help them, and they cleared all this rubble, and lo and behold, they found an ancient Egyptian temple of quite enormous size, about 270 feet. On the plateau, this thing came out from the mountain, and then there was a cave at the other end, and it went back a considerable way into the mountain as a sort of inside part of the temple. So it was astonishing. In fact, it was mammoth by any Egyptian standard. And there was this temple, 2,500 feet up a mountain. And so having cleared it, they started to sort of explore it in general, and found all sorts of amazing things. I mean, the furniture was still there. There were altars, and there were tables, and various things of that sort. There were lots of small artifacts.
Wooden furniture? Was it that well preserved?
No, it was stone. Stone altars. Everything there was stone. It was stone altars, stone tables, But what struck him as rather odd was the shape of these things. They weren't actually shapes like church altars one might imagine them to be. They had sort of recessed fronts on them. They had split level surfaces. And they looked really more like workbenches of some sort. And they found all sorts of very strange items there, including crucibles, metallurgist crucibles, and things that generally didn't seem to belong in a church. Well, subsequently, what actually happened was that once he was back and the linguists got hold of a lot of the stuff, to cut a long story short, the word that we now have as worship is really the interesting word. And I checked this out with the Oxford Word Library, and we checked it right back to its origin and found that actually the word worship only really entered the English language as such in about the Middle Ages. Mm-hmm. And prior to that, the word was workship. Workship. And workship was carried out in workshops called temples. So what was discovered was, in actual fact, it was a mammoth discovery, actually, because it was discovered there that temples in those times were different to churches. They were not about venerating gods. They were about working for gods or working for kings. And the priests had amazing names. The priests were called things like the Great Artificer or the Great Vulcan, that sort of thing. You know, the titles that seem to have very alchemical rings to them, or the rings of a workshop rather than the ring of a church, you know.
It's beginning to sound like we're not even talking about a temple in the sense that we mean, but about a place that has other dimensions as well.
Yeah. I mean, subsequent to that, looking again, as they did at temples in Egypt and in Mesopotamia, this same sort of theme seemed to follow, although nobody had ever really clued into it before, because it was thought that these were places of veneration, of religion. And they weren't about religion as such. They were about working for the masters, whoever the masters were, whether they were the kings or the gods or whatever. And it was really a question of trying to work out what they did in this workshop, in this temple, this massive temple. There were reliefs all over the walls, carvings. There were carvings on obelisks, there were carvings on standing stones, and all of these things were quite astonishing, because the whole place was dedicated to the Egyptian goddess Hathor, and it seemed to be related totally to gold. It was called the House of Gold. The inscriptions kept saying, "This is the House of Gold." There were relief carvings there of the treasurers, and the treasurers were called the great guardians or the overseers of the House of Gold. And in the portrayals, they're shown sort of making presentations of what looked like cakes, conical cakes, to the pharaohs. And the age of this thing was quite enormous. It actually, the inscriptions go right back from the 18th dynasty, around the time of Moses and Akhenaten, that sort of period, 1300 BC, that sort of time frame, and they go right back to about 2600, 2700 BC. And
that is really, that's
it was
deep
astonishingly
in the
old. Yeah.
Yeah, before the break even between the two kingdoms.
That's right. Yeah, I mean, it's before the era that the pyramids are attributed to, this sort of 2,500 year period. And so it was the 4th dynasty that seemed to actually establish this temple.
And how long did the temple continue to function?
Well, it functioned from about 2600 BC to about 1300 BC, so you're looking at a considerable time span there.
Yeah, over 1,000 years.
That's right, yeah. And all the time through that, each pharaoh had his own statues there, or his relief carvings, and each of them showed the various pharaohs being presented with these strange bread cakes. And the bread cakes had a name, and they called them mufkuts. The hieroglyph translated to MFKZT.
When I saw that word in the book, I thought, oh my goodness, I hope he pronounces it before I have to.
Oh, well, I mean, nobody really knows. I spoke to the Egypt Exploration Society, and they said, well, you can throw in whatever vowels you like, really. It's MFKZT.
Yeah, right. Whatever vowels you need to make the word work.
So I mean, generally, I just put a couple of U's in it, and Mufkut sounds as good as anything because it kind of says what it is.
Right.
But they didn't know what Mufkut was. They had no idea what it was. Whenever they found the word, it seemed to be related to these cakes, these sort of presentation bread-looking things. And alongside them was generally the hieroglyph for light. The sort of the circle with the dot in the middle, the light symbol that the Egyptians used. So,
yes.
So this Mufkut seemed to be related to light. It seemed to be related to bread. And there were these conical cakes there. Well, interestingly, and this didn't happen until afterwards, but at the Temple of Karnak in Egypt, there's a wonderful relief there, which shows the treasures of Pharaoh Thutmose III. And it's a brilliant relief because it's actually got the shelves, and laid out on these shelves are all his treasures in a relief form. And underneath them it tells you what they are. And on one of the shelves there is a whole line of these conical things, just the same as they were finding at the temple in Sinai. And it actually explains underneath them, and these are within the gold section. There's a silver section and a gold section and a gem section on the shelves. And they're within the gold section, and it says, these are the cones of white bread, and they are made of gold. So, the thing kind of tied together. The house of gold, the cakes, the conical-shaped cakes, the presentations, the overseers of the house of gold, and the fact that the bread cakes said to be the
made of gold.
Of the
bread
kingdom
made of gold. Something
made
you
of
can
gold,
eat.
yeah.
In other words, that's actually made of gold.
That's right, except they were white, so positively white in colour.
Now, has any of this white substance ever been found?
Well, yeah. I mean, Petrie actually made the discovery at that time. I mean, what he didn't know was that some of it had been found before, but the thing that clued him in really was the story of Moses from the book of Exodus. And he was on the mountain of Moses, and the strange story in Exodus, which precedes the Israelites moving on from the mountain, and it's the story which relates to the Ark of the Covenant and all of the fire and brimstone that was going on at the mountain. And what happened was that when Moses came down from the mountain, having apparently got the Ten Commandments, he came down and discovered that in his absence, his brother and the Israelites had got a little fed up with hanging around. And so his brother had collected up all the gold, all the earrings and various gold bands and whatever from the Israelites, melted this gold down and made as an idol of worship a golden calf. Now that's fairly straightforward. It upset Moses, but there's nothing odd about that.
Right.
But the next bit of the story is very odd. And the next bit of the story is, and remember this is taking place at the mountain where Petrie is now standing. The next bit of the story says, and when Moses saw the golden calf, he took it from his brother, he confiscated it, he burnt it with fire, he transposed it into powder, mixed it in water, and fed it to the Israelites. And the baffling thing about that, the thing that really made me wonder, and has made other scholars wonder, I suppose, in the past, is that it doesn't really matter how you heat gold, whether you do it slowly or fiercely. If you heat gold, you get molten gold. You certainly don't get powder.
No.
And so there was the anomaly. The anomaly was that at this house of gold, at this mountain, Petrie's there, he's looking at these bread cakes, he knows they're made of gold, they're white, they're conical, they're very, very valuable, they're presented to the kings, and the kings ingest them for whatever reason. And the Moses story is the same.
Yes.
The gold turns into powder. It's used as a food supplement.
And
now,
he took
in fact,
calf. Let me just read the from Exodus 32:20 as you have it in the book. And he took the calf which they had made and burnt it in the fire, and ground it to powder, and strawed it upon the water, and made the children of Israel drink of it. That is exactly what this ritual punishment or ritual action was as described in Exodus. So now go ahead, Laurence.
Well, I mean, it sounds, doesn't it, when you read that, as if it's some sort of a punishment, really. I mean, that's the way it reads.